Alright, fellow Trekkies and Trekkers, it's time for the second episode of Review of the Day, which is The Visitor. On Earth, in a house on the Louisiana bayou near New Orleans, it is dark and stormy outside as an elderly Jake Sisko injects himself with an unknown compound before sitting down in front of a fire. Soon, there comes a knock at the door and Jake answers, revealing a young woman, Melanie, looking for refuge from the downpour. After a few minutes of idle conversation, the visitor reveals that she in fact is a budding writer and is looking for the writer Jake Sisko. Confirming that Jake is who she's talking to, she cuts down to the chase and asks, very promptly, why he stopped writing. Taking a moment, Jake responds that he stopped writing because of an event that happened to him when he was 18 years old. He had lost his father, Benjamin Sisko. Jake had grown extremely close to his father after losing his mother. In a rare event that happens only every 50 years, the Bajoran wormhole was going to undergo subspace inversion. During this inversion, rare anomalies and temporal fluctuations are going to occur, creating a spectacle that the elder Sisko did not want he or his son to miss. Jake was working on a particularly difficult piece of prose at this time and was struggling with it when his father asked to come along on the USS Defiant to watch the inversion. Jake tried to hold himself away in the crew quarters to continue with his writing on his pad, but his father persuaded him to come to the bridge to watch, reminding him of all he'd missed if he doesn't look around once in a while, and then agreed to read and discuss what Jake has wrote afterwards. However, suddenly the Defiant was rocked when the wormhole began its inversion, causing a malfunction on the Defiant's engineering deck. Benjamin went to see it, followed by Jake, despite being asked to stay behind by his father. Arriving, Jack found the entire engineering crew unconscious and the warp core began to go critical from an energy flux. With Jake's help, Ben was able to stop the core from rupturing by using an interface compensator. As he passed a piece of equipment to his son, the warp core emitted an energy discharge. Jake was pushed out of the way. However, he witnessed his father's disappearance, and Benjamin was presumed to have been vaporized by the energy. At the memorial service, many people spoke highly of Captain Sisko, but Jake felt he could not. Jake began living with Dax, and everyone did their best to console Jake, even to the point where Quark allowed Nog a time off from the bar to spend time with him. Jake and Nog later discussed the former's future plans since Nog was about to leave for Starfleet Academy, and Jake admitted he was considering taking his deferred admittance to the Pennington School on Earth, but wanted to remain on the station too. However, one night as Jake lay in bed, there was a flash of light. Jake turned around and saw his father sitting in a nearby chair. A few seconds later, he disappeared again. Jake tried to explain what had happened to Dax, who agreed to scan for any anomalies. However, the scan turned up nothing, and Jake dismissed it as a dream. Meanwhile, the Klingons were making more angry noises, and the Bajorans, unsettled by the death of their emissary, entered into a defense pact with the Cardassians. The Klingons were very unhappy at this, and everyone knew that if war broke out, Deep Space Nine would be on the front lines. As a result, the majority of the civilian population left the station. Nog had left to attend Starfleet Academy, but Jake found himself feeling more despondent than ever. Kira and Worf tried to persuade Jake to leave, telling him it was the safest thing to do, but he refused. Later, at the upper pylon viewport, Kira approached Jake and told him that she knew his grandfather had asked him to live with him on Earth, and that even if Deep Space Nine wasn't the brink of war, she'd rather he wasn't on the station. Jake told her that the reason he was staying was because that when he and his father arrived, the station was a damaged hulk. But Sisko turned into a thriving community, and Jake explained that if he left the station, he felt like he'd be leaving the last part of his father behind. Kira allowed him to stay on the condition that when she tells him to leave, he will. He agreed. A few months later, Jake found his father in the corridor on DS9 and was physically able to touch him. Taking him immediately to the infirmary, they discovered that Ben was caught in a temporal inversion, falling in and out of sync with normal time and disappearing in subspace, unaware of the passage of time. Despite everyone's frantic attempt to save him, Ben began to disappear into subspace. Seeing the devastation in his son's face, Ben begged his son to reassure him he would be all right, but Jake was too upset to answer. Ben vanished, and Jake was left more heartbroken than ever. Jake tells Melanie he couldn't bear losing his father a second time. Melanie says she can come back later, but Jake says he's dying, so that won't happen. Jake tries to shrug off his previous admission by telling worried Melanie When he said he was dying, he was just admitting to the inevitable. Melanie assures him that he doesn't need to try and grab her attention, and the two briefly discuss her ambition to be a writer. Melanie then asks what happened next. Dax and Chief O'Brien spent the next few months trying to find a way to get Ben back, but they hit a dead end, especially as they couldn't recreate the accident since the wormhole would undergo another inversion for almost 50 years. Eventually, the situation with Klingons escalated, and Starfleet was forced to turn over DS9 to them. Jake had no choice to leave. He could only watch the station disappear into the distance as they left. With no choice but to carry on, Jake moved back to Earth, went to the Pennington School, and began writing. Afterward, he moved to Louisiana and married a Bajoran woman named Corinna, and was almost well when they met up with Nog, now a Starfleet commander. The Klingons were beginning to let Starfleet ships through the wormhole into the Gamma Quadrant to see how the Dominion would handle ships coming into space again. The three met up to celebrate Jake winning the Badar Prize, a prestigious writing award for his collected stories, and Jake seemed happy and settled. One night, Jake was up working on his newest novel and was discussing allowing Corinna, an artist, to design the cover, when suddenly the familiar flash of light came from the living room. Jake and Corinna entered to find Ben lying near the couch. Starfleet Science was immediately called, and Ben was eager to find out how his son was doing. He was delighted to find that Jake was married and had published 2 books, achieving his ambition. However, Jake began to get upset at everything his father had missed out on, and that he had given up on him. But Ben told Jake that nobody could be expected to hold on for so long, and that he was proud of him. Jake tells Ben that nothing he's accomplished matters now that his father is still out there. But Ben tells Jake that it all matters, and that even though he isn't there, he still wants grandchildren. Suddenly Ben disappeared again, and Jake was once again distraught. Jake stopped writing and began studying subspace mechanics in an attempt to get his father back. Corinna was initially patient. However, Jake's obsession cost him his wife. Jake wouldn't let this stop him, and he realized he could get Ben back by recreating the accident. By this time, 50 years had passed, and Jake hoped that because the Bajoran wormhole would be inverting again, he could grab his father and get him back into sync with his own life. Nog, now a captain, got the Divine out of retirement, and the crew, including Dax and Bashir, went to recreate the accident. However, instead of bringing Ben back, Jake was pulled into subspace where he encountered his father. Ben was again eager to find out what his son was doing, but was horrified to find Jake had lost his wife and abandoned his promising writing career in order to try and rescue him. Ben pleaded with his son to get back to writing and to live his life properly, telling him he shouldn't abandon his future for him. Eventually, Jake was pulled back from subspace. Back in the present, Melanie asks why he didn't go back to writing, and Jake reveals that he had, having been working on more collected stories. He tells her that there wasn't enough time left for him, as he is dying. Melanie realizes that Jake's father is about to appear, and bids Jake goodbye. Before she leaves, Jake makes Melanie promise to enjoy life, and once she is gone, he rests in an old chair before falling asleep. Waking the next morning, Jake opens his eyes to find his father sitting close by, observing him. Ben tells Jake how happy he is that he's living in the house again, and that he finally got back to writing. Jake asks Ben to read the dedication. To my father, who's coming home. Ben is touched, but Jake explains further. Jake is something that kept pulling Ben back into normal space. The snake was like a rubber band, and he was the anchor for his father. Sometimes the band would be pulled taut, and during those times before the tension was released, Ben would temporarily rejoin his timeline, but he pulled away again once it snapped back. Once Jake dies, Ben will be lost in subspace forever. The only way to save him is to cut the cord at the time it is most taut, when he is in perfect sync with Jake's timeline. If he did so, Benjamin would be shot back to the time of the incident, and he could jump out of the way before he got caught in the loop. Benjamin realizes that Jake has taken poison and is committing suicide. Ben is horrified and pleads with him not to do it and that he shouldn't sacrifice himself for him. But Jake explained he had to do so. By doing this, he is saving 2 lives, those of Ben and the boy Jake was, the boy who needs his father. Ben is devastated as his son dies in his arms. Ben suddenly finds himself back in the Defiant engine room just after he saved the ship. This time he was able to barely dodge the empty discharge away from energy discharge from the warp core. Jake is puzzled how his dad knew to get out of the way, but Ben, having seen how much his son was willing to give up in order to save him, can only hug him, and knowing they both now have a second chance. Yay! Alright, so let's take a look at some continuity surrounding this episode. Jake began writing Anselm under Onaya's influence later in the season in The Muse. The Dominion War did not happen as of the 2390s, the alternate timeline. Noxie said, I think they, the Klingons, were happy to have assisted the Waters in the Gamma Quadrant all these years, find how the Dominion would react to ships coming through. The shot of the upper pylon, with Jake staring out into space, and Kira approaching from behind to comfort him, seems to predict the very final shot of the series in the episode What You Leave Behind. The only difference is that the shot in the final episode is from outside the station, whereas this one is from inside. Despite the difference in the camera position, however, the blocking of the actors is very similar in both shots. Similar to later Star Trek Enterprise episode Twilight, as well as the Voyager episodes Time and Again, Year of Hell, and Year of Hell Part 2, this is sort of a bad dream episode, and that the plot resolution prevented the main part of the story from occurring. However, because Jake continued to write, it's still entirely possible that Melanie will become a fan of his in the main timeline. The episode is similar to the Star Trek Next Generation episode The Inner Light, in that they both feature a character living entire life up to old age. The difference being that, unlike Jean-Luc Picard, Jake lived as himself. Picard also retained all the memories of his life as Camille after the incident, while Jake didn't remember anything of his life as his older self. This is the first episode where Kira narrates is seen wearing the red uniform instead of orange that she ends up wearing for the rest of the series. So overall, I think this episode is really good, and it's also a very emotional one as well, so yeah, I think that's all I'll say about that. So overall, I give The Visitor 4 warp cores out of 5. Anyway, tune in a while as we take a look at the final episode of the day, Hippocratic Oath. So, until then, live long and prosper, everybody.